Right, anyone got any ideas about what they might do? Change jobs. Yes?
So I think from this table, we felt there was a lot of value in actually keeping going with the existing code of conduct and sort of maintaining the momentum on that and making use of every opportunity to keep that fresh, keep that alive, because it provides clarity, which is needed. There's obviously the whole how it's implemented, the sharp end side, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
But just on its own, I think we felt there was a value in sort of, keeping that going.
Yeah.
And then it's a question of how to keep it going. So I think my suggestion is actually having workshops at the end of the year with teams to actually make it a bit more lively and to cover some of those behavioural issues and how it's implemented.
And to understand from them what do they see the challenges, what are their difficulties, to talk that through, and then you can explore how what that ownership is, how they can then see owning it and the way forward. So it's engaging them in that thought process of what your policy is and what you can move to that. It just becomes much more holistic.
Okay, because
bespoke it as well, because doing one workshop for every person and every type of function within the organisation just doesn't work. You need to make it more relevant for the particular people, so not sitting there like a bit on desks. This is the weakness.
yeah, so there's something in there about the in some roles you're sharp end, and in some roles you're the blunt end, and they become the sharp end. And if they're not interested or engaged and thinking, oh yeah, I know what the policy is, boss, but it doesn't do anything for me, so I'm not interested. So you have to engage people. You have to make them want to be interested in this. Yeah.
You talked a lot about a lot of employees are receiving these policies and know they're very important, but being really clear that there is gray and that it's okay if something comes up and you're not sure, but being comfortable to have that dialogue.
Yeah.
Because they may be thinking it's black and white, and that may be driving bad decisions, or they may feel uninformed. So just telling them there is gray, come to your manager, we'll discuss it through. I think might help more.
So part of that, I think, is a really important issue about leadership, which is about permission giving. You have to give people permission to understand it's okay to be confused about what I should be doing in this situation. And you know what? I'm confused sometimes. And that will give them permission to think, well, if the boss is confused, that's okay. That allows me to say the same kind of thing. So the permission giving stuff is really important here. Anything else? Yeah.
We talked a lot about practical wisdom and the fact that there is a lot of practical wisdom that's been residing in the business for a long time. And just because we've got it wrong in some places doesn't mean that wisdom still isn't there. So it's finding ways to give people that confidence in applying that wisdom, learning new things as well.
Yes.
But the confidence has been not having, so there's a lot more questions being asked from people who perhaps know how to do things and need to be reassured that they do.
Yeah.
So workshops and seminars and clinics or case studies, that kind of thing, so that people get imbued.
It's almost worth thinking about, so what might work? I'm going to be using, whatever might work, I'm going to be using it to get the messages across. Yes?
I think it's really important that we start telling a positive story around this. I'm talking in my own function, sales, about looking at, we can feel quite pressed down, if you like, by words like compliance and by a lot of the administration that goes along with it. So trying to, for me, it's about working out what is a more positive story, because a lot of the things we've discussed today and the last day and a half are messages and stories that will be very resonant for our customers. They will like these kind of ways of thinking. They'll be, these are good things we can take. These are things that can make us stronger. And I think my responsibility is to shift as much as possible onto some of the practicalities and clarifying what is very opaque, which is really difficult, but also making sure that the message remains upbeat and positive and looking to customers in the future.
Yes.
Rather than bowed down by administration.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Claire to respond to some back to that in a way of thinking about the metaphors by which we engage in conversations. But before I do that, I just want to say we've done quite a lot of work with children's services over the last few years, and one of the things that they always get is bound down by the compliance systems and the complete absence of good stories. There are no good stories in social work. There are just bad stories. And last year we were in Cardiff doing some work, And one of the guys said he's been a social worker for 15 years, and the previous year, he was completely burnt out. 15 years as a social worker is a hell of a long time to be able to put up with this. And he said he was just having a conversation with a little boy who was in care, he was 10, and he just said, "So what's your first memory, son?" And the little boy said, "Oh, a really dark, being thrown about and a police siren." And he said, "Well, where does that memory come from?" He said, "Oh, my mother was a junkie, and the police came and battered the front door down, and I don't remember this bit, but apparently I was 3, and she grabbed me under her arm, put me in the boot of the car, and drove out with the police chasing us. So my first memory is being thrown about in the boot of a car with the police chasing us. That's my first memory." And the social worker said in the group, and that's what made me stop resigning. Because I thought, actually, you can do some good. And you have to be able to reproduce the good stories rather than the negative stories all that. It's not about, if it's just about compliance, we're all wasting our time. The compliance is important, but why is the compliance important? Because it's a good idea, not because you have to do it. I do want to ask Claire to think about, coming back to the washing machine metaphor and the way that the metaphors that we use to think about the organisation are really important.
Yeah, it was just really the metaphor of the washing machine, sort of revolving, going around in circles. And actually that's quite a negative metaphor. And what I'd like to just stress is the power of using language and metaphors and trying to translate what could be perceived as negative into something more positive. And it made me think of evolve. Don't think of it as revolve and going round and round in circles and not getting anywhere. Look at it as a chance to evolve. And it made me think of my brother's iguana. He's got this beautiful iguana, and what happens with her is that just before she sheds her skin, she goes very grey. And she looks really quite glum and down, and all her spines down her back bend over. But within a few days, she sheds her skin, she evolves. And all of a sudden, she's this amazing bright green again. And that's what you need to think about when things do start to grey, whether it's the ethics and the codes. And that's why the idea of positivity and maybe having workshops a bit more frequently to get people involved, get people engaged, get people there, but do it using positive stories, positive analogies, and positive language. The Obama campaign in 2008, as an academic who was involved in that, a chap called Jeffrey Alexander, and he observed the very clever use in what they call Camp Obama of turning negative words like anger and frustration into using the words, making people think a bit more of emotion. If you get people emotional in a positive way and use emotion rather than anger, it's more positive. Emotion is good, anger is not. So think about the way that you do communicate things. It's a very, very important thing to keep people engaged and to keep evolving, not revolving.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Nigel in a second just to finish this off, but any final comments?
I just have one thought about the point that was just made about making this a little bit more inspirational. I think that we're all in an environment where technology is causing this fragmentation of our sales and distribution models. And I think that poses all sorts of new and different challenges that we haven't had to deal with before. And some, at least, of those challenges are raise ethical questions. And Barbara and I just had a debate back and forth, and John as well, about a question involving royalties on the higher education textbook, the custom textbooks, essentially. And I actually found that to be a pretty compelling exchange because it was an ethical question. It was coming up in a couple parts of the business. We worked it through over the course of the day, and it was then. It was actually quite gratifying and even intellectually kind of challenging, especially given that it was resolved pretty quickly. So I think that idea of, especially from a sales standpoint, that part of the reason there's such an emphasis on this is just because everything is changing so quickly, and in a changing landscape like that, oftentimes ethical dilemmas come up that weren't presented when it was a much more, in this case, sort of monolithic sales format. So.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Yes.
Just thinking back, we talked about values and policies and the extent to which, because a lot of those policies, a large part of that driver was the legal side, the client side.
Yeah.
And actually, are we sure that our values are reflected in those policies? And there's a piece of work to be there, I think, in terms of really understanding where within ELT we have vision and values, to what extent do those match up to those policies.
So for me, the issue is have the conversation, and if they do, it's absolutely fine. If they don't, start thinking about that. But if you're not absolutely sure, you can be pretty sure people beneath you are probably not absolutely sure either. Okay, Nigel.
Well, thank you very much. I think we should show our appreciation